The Reptilians at the Mexico border. This is a story based on events that occurred in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico. I have been a sheriff for years and have lived long enough to assure you that there are many things in this world that we are unaware of, things that remain hidden from us, or that we sometimes refuse to believe in and call legends or myths. On this occasion, I want to tell you about a very peculiar case and the surprise I got when I thought I was dealing with mere criminals or migrants. I am Osvaldo Montero, and this is my story. It happened in the town of. We had a quiet day. Some officers had arrested a couple of thieves in the morning, and we spent the rest of the day relaxed at the station. The weather was cloudy, perfect for sleeping until dark, but we couldn't afford that luxury. For days, we had received warnings of multiple migrants escaping from the United States to Mexico. We were ordered to notify a national security number if we had those visitors in the town. It was rare to hear about people leaving that country for hours in such a way. The life everyone dreamed of was on that side, not this one. I understood that the warning was due to our proximity to the border, but we almost paid no attention. This town was one where almost nothing interesting happened, and the people were as calm as the environment. Of course, like all places, there is insecurity, and that morning served as proof. Here, the interesting thing happened after 6 in the evening. Some officers reported several people running through.
Soon after, an incident was reported at a restaurant with more than 10 emergency calls. We responded immediately. I personally wanted to know what it was about, and the first person I spoke to was the owner of the place. He told me that 2 people arrived with the breeze, running as if they were crazy or fleeing from who knows what. They entered, breaking windows and overturning tables, all without stopping or giving any explanation. A team of firefighters was containing a fire that broke out in the kitchen. Some colleagues were helping to keep the community away from the scene. The crowd exceeded 40 inhabitants. I understood then that it was not a common robbery case. Besides, they didn't take anything, according to the restaurant owner. He couldn't find any explanation for what happened. So I decided to wait until the firefighters finished and went in to take a look at how the restaurant was left. It was exactly as the owner said. They didn't take anything.
The tables had been thrown with tremendous force, as I deduced from how far they were from where they should be. Of course, I did rule out that it was all done by 2 people, but it still seemed something personal against the restaurant. I kept investigating, and one of my colleagues informed me that they had a witness who claimed to have clearly seen one of the perpetrators. So we decided to take him to the station, but I wanted to keep checking before leaving. I stepped on broken glass as I walked, and it felt incredibly stifling. Seeing all that, I understood the restaurant owner's frustration. He didn't care so much about the perpetrators, but about what they did, how they did it, and the uncertainty of not knowing why. I went back to him and asked if he had any enemies. People who owed him or whom he owed. He said no. In fact, an employee said he was a very kind and respected person. They never expected something like that to happen. Others assured that the perpetrators were not from the town because they didn't recognize them and kept their faces covered, sometimes with their hands or shirts. It seemed strange to me. If they weren't from around there, they wouldn't need to cover themselves unless they were hiding something. One of my colleagues was waiting, insisting that the answers might lie with the witness on his way to the station. I wanted to believe that, but didn't rule out that no one told us where the perpetrators went. It was so confusing because some said there were 2 and others said 3. I decided to ignore the comments that only became rumors and not evidence, clues or anything. I got into the patrol car and headed to the station to hear what the witness had to say. We interrogated him in a separate room, and before we started, he clarified that he would only tell what he saw. He asked us not to judge him. During the chaos in the restaurant, one of the perpetrators covered his face immediately, but the other focused on him for a few seconds, which was enough for him to realize that he lacked pupils like everyone else. I asked for a more detailed and coherent explanation, and he explained that his eyes had no whites. Everything was green, and instead of a circular pupil, he saw a black vertical line that moved, fulfilling the same function. My colleague and I looked at each other, not knowing what to think or say. It was the first time in my life I heard a testimony like that. I was impressed. I couldn't deny it. I had to ask him to repeat what he said, and indeed, my ears didn't hear wrong. He described a person with lizard eyes. I told him that was impossible unless it was a trick or the perpetrator was wearing some kind of contact lenses to attract or not attract attention. The witness defended his testimony, saying it looked very natural and that if it were fake, there would be no reason to cover his face as he did seconds later. There were already two things that didn't make sense: what happened in the restaurant and the supposed appearance of one of the suspects. I asked him to describe more in detail, and they made a composite sketch. It was an ordinary human being, but the topic of reptilian eyes was controversial. Even the artist asked me if I really wanted to add those features to the sketch, and I said yes. I didn't make copies or anything. Everyone at the station refused to look for someone out of a fairy tale. They threw comments with hidden insults towards the witness, so I let him go to avoid making him uncomfortable. I spent a large part of the night looking at that sketch while the others avoided looking at me and giving me dirty looks because they knew I wouldn't tolerate what they did to the witness. It seemed strange to me. I don't know why I didn't discard that sketch immediately. I knew myself well enough to know that I had a hunch about that incident in the restaurant. They didn't even take any food. It felt more like a distraction, a smokescreen to fulfill another objective, one that was hard for me to guess. I decided to do the right thing and called the national security number given by my superiors when warning us about migrants from the United States. I felt strange as I listened to the phone ringing. I felt that those warnings had hidden details that couldn't be revealed just like that. A woman answered. It was 11 at night, and there were still people on the line. I explained that we apparently had migrants hiding in the town who had already caused the first disturbance. She immediately asked if I had noticed anything strange or peculiar about them, any characteristic out of the ordinary. I realized then that the witness was not lying. If the thing about their eyes was true, I felt confident enough to tell her over the phone. She immediately asked me to stay on the line, and 2 minutes later, a man spoke to me. He told me his position, and I was surprised to find out that he was not from Mexico, but from the United States. I didn't understand why a situation like this had to be handled by the neighboring country. It was evident that it was something serious. Then he asked again what peculiar characteristics the migrants had. I repeated everything I told the woman, and that was when he told me to send police to patrol the streets and not let anyone leave the town until they arrived. They hung up without giving me an explanation. I didn't hesitate and felt that something serious was happening with those migrants. So I sent all available officers to patrol and not stop until the national security arrived. I didn't want to tell them that it was actually the Secret Service. These were not things to be said just like that. I also patrolled, but I went alone. I didn't want any companion because I felt that at any moment, the Secret Service might call me, and it would be an uncomfortable conversation. Anyway, I made it clear that they had to be alert for migrants, and if they spotted any, to capture them immediately. That's when I passed by my house and was surprised to see the living room and one of the room's lights on. I lived alone. My wife died 4 years ago, and I had no children. I quickly parked and drew my gun, holding it up and walking slowly to the door. As soon as I opened it, the lights went out, and I heard footsteps running from one side of the living room to the other. I reported it on the radio and immediately asked for reinforcements. I warned whoever was inside that patrols were arriving, that it was foolish to try to escape or hide. I gathered my courage and advanced, using a flashlight to see. The night was dark, and my house didn't help with the lighting. I stopped hearing the footsteps at the same time that more than 3 agents confirmed their support and that they were on their way to my house. That's when the light came back on, and I received a blow.